everybody. You're listening to and possibly watching the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Steve Morey.
And I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
And we are your hairy, heavy homos that talk about comic books, but you don't have to be a hairy, heavy homo to listen in or possibly stream in. I mentioned hair, and I kind of took a pause there because two of us have a lot less now. One got de-Jufroed, and I got de-Farad. So
de-Farad. Ah.
Oh, it was so unwieldy. Oh my god! Like when Tito, my friend Tito, visited the New York area, and I spent 2 days with him, but like he told me I had to keep the hair. You know, like that was his vote to keep the hair, and like, woo, boy, that next day.
It was gone.
Oh my god! It's just tough to maintain it, man. It's really tough.
I think
believe me, at age 56, I'm lucky to have that problem. I'm very lucky.
It looks really good, like when you grow it out, though. It really does.
Oh, thank you.
I like it. I like it both ways. I love it buzzed. I think it's awesome. But when it gets longer, like you go through like the different phases. You go through like the Kenny Rogers phase, which is like, mwah. And then of course the Farrah hair.
Yeah, the Kenny Rogers phase really is my favorite of all the Bill hairstyles. Like of all the hair accessories that the Bill doll comes with, it really is the Kenny Rogers. But I mean, like there's something to be said for the buzz cut too. So
yeah, that could be the tagline from Rogers to Rollins. Yeah.
There you go.
I mean buzz cuts, mohawks.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
And your hair looks really good, Steve. I like what Jason.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Jason does an amazing job, which is why, like, when he had said while he was out in Colorado, he was like, "Oh, you should just go and find somebody to do it." And I was like, "Okay." And I asked around and got some recommendations, but of course everybody was like booked out until April anyway, which I was like, I was kind of relieved. I could have gone to like a Great Clips at any time, but I'd been there before, and the choppy is no goody. So
yeah,
at any of the Great Clips
I've ever been to in town closed, and they were good.
Oh, lucky.
Pretty good. Yeah.
I get the people who are like,
"This is my job." La Bamba.
Yeah. So we had a Sport Clips, and for the longest time, that's where I would go because there was I would go to see the same woman every time. She was an older woman. She could do an amazing fade. I loved her. Like she could hold her own against anybody. And then she moved to Texas of all places. And so I had to go search and find a new barbershop. Luckily I did find one super awesome. It's not far from where I live. That just, I just really enjoy going there now. So a good barbershop is worth its weight in gold. It really is.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. When I was working in Newark, great places to eat, but there's also like a barbershop on every other street.
Yeah,
it's a lot of old Colombian and Brazilian guys, and they would do the thing with the hot towel and then the hot cream on the back of the neck, and oh my, it's a sexual experience as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, who could say no to hot cream on the back of the neck?
Oh, Steve,
you knew he was going to.
I knew. It's my fault.
There was no way it was not going to happen.
I drove right into that ditch, and I shouldn't collect insurance on it. Yeah.
The ditch next to the gutter.
But we've been gone for 3 weeks. We had last week off, but luckily we are in a month that has 5 Thursdays, so you still got us like sort of.
Yeah, we're still meeting the quota.
Yeah, we're still going to make our 24 episodes. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So great. In that 3 weeks, how have you guys been?
I've been good. I've been busy as hell.
Yeah.
I've been busy as hell. And, I was telling Steve before you got on, Caleb, like yesterday was one of those, I haven't signed into LinkedIn in a while.
Right?
It was like one of those, I wonder if I still have a Ladders, account, But today was better, but it's just it's not bad. It's just busy.
Yeah,
it's just so busy, and it's just there's a big Groundhog Day component of what we're doing right now, and the end's in sight. But I'm reliving the same day again and again, pretty much. So.
Yeah.
And everyone I work with is in the same boat, so it's it's not like some people have an advantage of but that's I'm also in consulting, and I know this is it's finite, and whatever comes next is going to be in the same business realm, but it'll be different, and that's a saving grace at points.
Yeah.
Well, Roger and I had our nieces up last week for the spring break hotness, so as we usually do. So we had teenage girls in the house for 9 days, and it is both. It was the best of times and the worst of times. It's super fun, but it's exhausting. And if you're like me, like I'm a very particular kind of guy, and I like my space and I like my quiet. Like I like to wake up and have coffee and listen to music and do that stuff. And just when you have people in your space for that long, it can be very just like nerve wracking, and not in a bad way. Like nothing bad is happening, but it's just like, hey, things are different. You're out of your routine. But there was lots of movie watching. We went and saw Dune 2 again, which was great because we got them to watch that. We watched all of let me rephrase that. We watched the first 3 Matrix movies, which, as far as I'm concerned, is the only Matrix movies that were made. This last thing they made doesn't exist. And then we found on the Nintendo Switch, there was like a thing that we could get for free that has like all of the Super Nintendo, Atari, just thousands of games. And so we downloaded that, and like we played OG Mario, OG Tetris for hours and hours and hours. Dr. Mario, it was fun times. So that was just like in-depth nerd stuff. And the kids are in that cool stage where they're discovering music, like really discovering it. So I was just like like we were just going, like I was like, oh, you like that? Well, then here's these 7 other people you need to know. And it was like new stuff, old stuff. So it was just very much like, let me teach the next generation. And the next generation was like, no, dude, we don't care. We just want to listen and go get ice cream. Like we don't need you to expound on this. We're good. But I was just like, no, this will treat you good someday. And
I've got to do my full sermon. I have to do my full sermon. Do not cut my sermon short.
I saw my first concert since November.
Nice.
That's cool.
Porno for Pyros on the final date of their farewell tour. We all know how that works out sometimes. I've seen a few bands on through farewell tours.
How many times do we have to say goodbye to Cher?
I don't know. At least the Turtles were honest about it, because after a point, this is like their 4th annual farewell tour. So sometimes there's folks that are honest about it, but yeah. But there are some groups I think are done. Like I think we're going to get a very definitive end statement from The Who at some point this year.
I think so.
Yeah, I think there are some groups that even if it's not because of losing a band member or something, that it's just age provides that bands are a finite thing, and it's weird.
Yeah, I was talking really with somebody. I was talking with somebody just the other day, and like I actually genuinely think Kiss is done. I think Kiss is done.
Yeah.
And because everybody else is like, oh no, they're gonna do another thing. And I was like, I don't feel it this time. Yeah. Like I think that they're done. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and I wouldn't be surprised if we we may see Gene Simmons come out and do appearances and stuff, but I don't think we're gonna see them, at least Gene and Paul, on stage again together.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I think they've made that sort of like step into the digital realm with their, I guess, with the promotional thing or whatever. But it's probably just going to be from now on just a way of repackaging all of the old music and old concepts. Animation, you don't need them. You don't need them anymore.
The thing is, how many acts are on that ABBA level? that
Yeah.
people would see it, you know.
Yeah.
And part of it is because we didn't have ABBA as a touring act, you know, since 1980.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I think a genuine Beatles avatar would do like amazing business. I think there's some acts where like a Jimi Hendrix experience. I think there's some, but it would still be, you know, this would be the interest, you know, at point one, and then after point it'll retract. And
See,
that's definitely gonna be the case.
I wonder about that though, because I was actually kind of surprised at the reaction about the last, you know, the Beatles song, the final Beatles song that came out, where they took it, you know, they took all the thing, you know, it got a lot of hype for about a week, and then after that, you started seeing a lot of criticism about it. And I just like the reaction was not what I thought it would be, because I thought it would be cool, you know, like, hey, this really is the last thing that they did. They put it together, and then they used AI just a little bit, but they didn't use AI to like invent new stuff. They just used it to kind of mesh everything. But people really didn't. After the first week, people really didn't get into it that much.
Well, except for that guy. But anyway,
I mean, you know, that's what. Yeah.
No, I think we're in a very different music landscape anyway. Like anything in the 21st century now, if you are a band that's putting out something big, it'll be hyped up. But there's so much else going on. I mean, people have exposure and the ability to listen to anybody they want at any time. And so I think that there will always be mega stars. There will always be sort of like a big drop, a big release, you know, that'll happen. And it might continue throughout that year. But
I have to say, as I've gotten older, I have such a skewed idea of who's big.
Yeah.
Like in the New York area, Cigarettes After Dark, because a band I like are playing Madison Square Garden. This is a band that's never crossed, like, they've never been in the Billboard 100. They've never been there. They've like, I think their highest charting album is like 132.
Yeah.
And I don't understand that. You know, I don't have a good gauge of what is big. It's just strange, because you know, there was also like
I can't believe
and
I
even
can't
like
believe
with
Steve
the kind
let
of
that
social
slide.
media, like you think of a song like Lil Boo Thing. Like, I thought that guy would be like hugely big, and he was a blip. I forget his name.
You know, so
yeah,
I think part of it is also because, you know, most music listeners now, or like anybody, any consumer of music, can exist in their own. I don't want to use the word bubble, because bubble makes it sound like really like insular and you know, but really, I mean, you curate your own music experience. I mean, it's easy to kind of like through Spotify, you know, or, you know, playlists and things like that, people can introduce you to new bands, new music. But I think a lot of times we kind of now have the ability to just listen to whatever we want whenever we want. And so we want to find bands that are most like what we like to listen to. Not to say that we can't get introduced to anything cool, but, you know, I think it's harder to like really make an impact on a grand scale. You have your fans are very loyal, but like really expanding that pool to a point where you have like a big cultural phenomenon, it's hard to do. You've got your Taylor Swifts and your Beyonces, yeah, but you've got some amazing acts and some amazing bands that they have hardcore fans, but they're not going to be on the level of like a Rolling Stones or even a Creedence Clearwater Revival, you know, like something like that people in 30 years are going to be like, oh my God, that band defined this generation, you know, or that band, like that, I hear that song and everybody has the same sort of like cultural memory experience of it. So for a lot of things, I mean, there are, you know.
Yeah, it's very algorithmic, right? Like when the way that we curate. But on the other side of that coin, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about my dad and his band, who just like charted the highest that they ever have. Yeah, Judas Priest. So, you know, like that are just their album. It's like second highest or something like that, isn't it?
I don't think so.
Oh, this one's hitting like critical acclaim. Like they're charting Billboard.
It's the best charting album for theirs in England.
Okay, maybe that's what I saw.
It came in at number 2, so maybe that. But I know that I know Firepower and Angel of Retribution came in higher at the very least. But in terms of physical
You say
sales,
firepower?
you're like number one, like in a big way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
It's like blowing up in the coolest.
Still a
ways.
number one, you know?
Yeah.
It's still a number one. But
Well, when they put out the next Christmas album. No.
Well,
all
music
right.
was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We might be seeing it a little later when we get to our Geek Gets.
Yep.
That's all I'll say.
Yay.
All right, we've had some news. Why don't we
Oh,
start with the less controversial bit? Steve, do you want to talk about the new X-Men titles that were announced at and a very cool venue to announce at South by Southwest?
Yeah, so like it was kind of wild that they, that Marvel would announce it at a music and a film festival, but hey, they've got the audience. Most of the people who are going to this festival love the X-Men or know about the X-Men, or it's not going to be completely out of place for them to be talking to these people. But they announced several new books and hinted at some additional books that are going to be announced a little bit later on. Probably, I think like San Diego, there would probably be some additional books announced. They were able to announce a few of the teams and a few of the new titles. We've got the Uncanny X-Men, written by Gail Simone, which is nice to see her back on an X-Men book. We'll see how she does. I think that might be cool. Drawn by David Marquez. You also have just adjectiveless X-Men is going to be written by Jen McKay and Ryan Stegman. And then we've also got Exceptional X-Men is making a comeback with Eve Ewing and Carmen Carnero. I'm really happy to see Uncanny back. Just nostalgia reasons. I'm not exactly sure if they're going to go back to legacy numbering. I know that the last time they did, when they ended the last series, they ended it with the final issue. I think it was 600.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember.
It depends how close they are to a number that ends in 00.
Yeah,
Right,
I guess.
yes,
I mean,
That's basically it.
that's where they're going to throw it back on there. But yeah, it's just nice to see that again. Uncanny, and then Adjective is X-Men. I never read Exceptional X-Men when it first came out. The first volume. I think it's had 2 volumes. But
Well, that's me.
in any case, for me, I'm excited, but I'm also kind of disappointed because I'm kind of annoyed that we're still going to be seeing multiple X-Men titles, an entire comic publisher's line of comics of X-Men titles.
Yeah. Which has always been the problem.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much. All the other books are ending. They are going to be ending before we go into the summer. But Wolverine's going to be back. There's going to be, I think, another Deadpool series. I think we've got another X-Force, another X-Factor kind of on the line, coming up as well. They did announce that. There's a lot. And I love X-Factor again coming back because I love X-Factor. But again, it's a lot of titles and it's a lot to keep up with. And I think I appreciate what they're doing, and I appreciate that they're going in a completely new direction. We're going to be post-Krakoa altogether. I like some of the creative teams, but there's still too much. I'm not going to be able to read all these books. I have no interest in reading every title. I'm going to pick Uncanny, might go with X-Men, plain X-Men, and I'll pick up X-Factor. And those 3 are it. Maybe Wolverine. I like Wolverine, but it's just
warm.
Just too much. There's too much.
Okay.
But I'm still excited.
And I think it's also worth mentioning that Tom Brevoort is going to be the editor. He's moving from the Avengers office to the X-Men office.
Yeah.
I think no matter what you think about the guy, he was a factor in making the Avengers a premier franchise comic book wise.
Yeah.
There
solid editor.
There were times it was an afterthought. It was a time. There were times before Bendis and New Avengers #1 that there was a book that people took as a concession instead of their first pick. So
kind of a cut your teeth title, or we don't know where to put you. Let's just have you write this for a little while.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many times after, I really liked Jeff Johns on it. I surprisingly liked Chuck Austin on it, and I usually hated his stuff, but I thought at least his first 2 arcs were pretty good. But it did, like, after Busiek then Johns, it did feel like everything was a holding pattern until
That's right. I was sitting there trying to remember when Johns wrote it, and it was after the Busiek, which is to me, that's my Avengers, right? The Busiek Perez Avengers is my stuff. So I was trying to remember. I didn't do that, and then you get to the problem is the Avengers suffers the same thing that X-Men suffers from sometimes, and it's not necessarily just that there's too many titles, because there's only one Avengers title, right? But you've got Avengers, you've got Thor, Captain America, you've got Iron Man, you've got everybody gets their solo, the Hulk, right? But it's that people often forget there is something in the makeup of those books, right, that makes it special. If you look at going back to the X-Men, right, Uncanny X-Men, that's your flagship team, right? X Factor. Peter David's X Factor was amazing. Like that, like Jamie Madrox is in my top 10 of characters because of Peter David, right? It's phenomenal, right? But he made it.
As I call them, Havoc's Debbie Downers.
But
Havoc's Debbie Downers. I like that, and I'm going with it.
He made it something special, right? He made it something singular. Yeah. You could not take that book. It did not line up with the other books. In continuity, it did, but right, it wasn't immersive. If you read Uncanny, right, like even just a few months back, if you read X-Men or you read X Factor or X-Force, everything, there's nothing that makes those books singular. Like they could have just switched the titles. It's almost very formulaic. Each time, yes, one of them's on Mars, the other one's doing some weird shit, but like there's nothing that makes it stand out on its own, that it needs to be its own book. They could have just made it a storyline.
Yeah.
And instead of going one storyline where they do these things, they do 40 books and then they run out of ideas for them and they have to do a relaunch.
That's the only thing I'm a little apprehensive about the Brevoort stuff, because and this may have been more Hickman than anybody. Like if you threw me 2 issues and told me which one was Avengers and which one was New Avengers during Hickman's run, I couldn't tell you.
No, but because they overlap. You had to read them both at the same time.
Whereas prior to that, you had, the first incarnation of New Avengers was radically different.
Yeah.
From what came before, and then when that became Avengers, and it was new, there was a lot of variety between Initiative and Avengers Academy, and things seem to. And I will say with Avengers, they seem to know when to take their bow. When they've run out of ideas or they've told what they needed to tell. In X-Men, you don't always get that.
No.
Unless Jason Aaron's writing it, and then they give him about 40 issues too many.
Yeah. Well, and the thing with X-Men up to this point, where you're talking about overlapping. Oh, this title, there's really no difference to it. Yes, there's some characters that are unique, but they're all playing in the same sandbox, and they're all dealing with the same toys. And it's all not. It's all X-Men
team.
Yeah. So, like, when you're trying to recommend X books to people, at least the past couple of years have been this way, where it's like, oh, you want to read Immortal X-Men, but you want to read Immortal X-Men between like this issue and this issue, and then you want to pick up X-Force, but you want to drop X-Force after you get about 15 issues in, because then it gets like all like Beast is a crap, piece of crap, and blah, it's tough. It's tough to recommend books, or even to jump on, because there's so much that's happening, and there's so much that's all interconnected that it's like, oh, I stopped reading. I stopped reading X-Factor. I stopped reading X-Force for this amount of time, and then I went and picked up a book lately, and I don't know what's going on. What's happening with this? Or I've been reading the main X title, but I'm missing all this other stuff that's being referred to, and it's important that I know. And it's tough, and I'm hoping that they get away from that type of storytelling for at least a while with all these new X books. But given recent history, I'd say, and by recent I mean like the past 20 years, or even 30 years, the past 30 years of X books, it doesn't stay disconnected for very long. Like you start having to pick everything up and read through everything in order to get the whole story.
Well, at the end of the day, complain is, I can complain all I want to about this, that, or the other. And Marvel doesn't pay me; they don't care, right? But what it boils down to is this: if you want to read every X-Men book, there's nothing wrong with that. Go for it, right? And talk about what you love, talk about what you don't love. Do you? My money only runs me so far every month. So I can't afford to buy the whole line, and so I'm going to pick and choose. And if you want me to pick up a book out that is other than X-Men, right? If you want me to pick up one of the side books, then you've got to pitch me on it. You've got to sell me on it. And if at least from my vantage point, it looks like, okay, this is just another X-Men book. There's nothing that stands out about it. There's nothing that really draws me in. Then I can live without it. And bless anybody who wants to pick it up and tell me.
Uh-oh. That's how he froze.
Wow, that's a perfect image.
I think I have jammed up a little bit there.
Yeah, you froze.
Oh, there you go. I can hear you. Yeah,
it was a
moving.
great pose, though, brother.
It was.
But what I was saying is, if you want me to pick up a book, then make it stand out to me, and that will gravitate me to you. Steve, you mentioned Immortal X-Men. That's a book that I grabbed because it was something different, right? Ben Percy on a book is going to make me pick it up because for many reasons. But have you heard that man's voice? It's like sex. It's like audible sex. It's amazing.
Have you seen that man?
Oh my God, I would climb that tree. Anyway, but that's just what it. But since we're talking about X-Men, right, and we're talking about new things, it's a good moment to interject and say, hey, the new X-Men animated feature or animated series has dropped. Have you guys checked that out at all?
The first two. I haven't watched the third.
I haven't seen the third one yet either. Yeah,
I have seen the third one. And the one criticism I have about it is that it wraps up the Madeline Pryor, Jean Grey story pretty quick. But I am just happy that they are going there. I'm happy in this X-Men 97. It's totally full of winks to everybody who's grew up watching the original one.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's also some maturity there. There is some maturity in the storytelling. The art is, in the same style, but it is not the same quality animation. It is Disney bucks better, which is great. I mean, I really like it. I watch it as soon as it comes out on Wednesday. So it's very, very, very close to my heart when I was a kid, and I'm happy it's back now, and I'm happy that they're telling the stories they are so far. So
the one thing that I don't think has been discussed enough is the 97 version is really making me appreciate how good at their craft some of the voice actors were. I just dismissed them in the 90s as, maybe it is because there was a few step ups in maturity, but especially Allison Seeley Smith as Storm and Cal Dodd as Wolverine. Maybe it's because they have material now that has a bit more bite to it, but I gotta say, like like I said, I dismissed them as you're working voice actors. There was a reason they weren't Andrew Romano produced shows, voice directed shows. But I'm really appreciating them more now, what they brought to those characters.
Well, and they do, like, the voices immediately take you back. When you hear them talk, you're like, oh my God, I remember, and it's a good feeling. Like, the nostalgia wave is a real thing with it, but they're not just relying on it, which is.
Well, I also think the mechanism of literally taking it from the next day, from where they left off, it works. They're not. It's not a reboot. It's. It's a continuation.
It's a continuation,
and I think that I think for this particular kind of project, it really works.
Well, and so for me, like, I was growing up with this show, right? Like, I mean, so for me, the voice of Storm, right? That is the iconic sound of Storm for me, because that is the Storm I heard in my formative years. In 97, I was 10. So, like, that to me was that's what those voices are. So the reason I say that is not for any age gap reasons though, but it's, you guys were you were cognizant of voice actors at that time, right?
Yeah.
You understood what that was. I was a kid immersed in animation, right? Immersed in that world. And just like, I didn't understand the voice actors, the concept of it. These were just those characters. These were those characters with their voices being brought to life. And so that, to me, it is Storm, right? That's her voice.
Yeah.
And so to hear that again, that just the way that she enunciates, the way that she puts certain, words, and she stresses certain syllables, that's what Storm sounds like when I read the comics. And so to do that again, and to hear her voice, and she's gotten older a little bit now, but to hear that, but it's still there. To me, it really does take. It's not even a nostalgia feel. It's like it's coming back home, right? It's not me reminiscing. It's just saying, no, this is right. This is what it's supposed to sound like. This is Storm. This is Logan. Cyclops sounds great in the show as well too. So,
that's a new actor because the original actor passed away.
Yeah, I was wondering about that but it's very close.
He's damn close.
Yeah, he's very close.
He's damn close. Yeah.
But one of my favorite things about the original series is that it does take these storylines and it condenses it a little bit. I mean, you get the Brood, you get the the Days of Future Past in like 2 episodes. So it doesn't surprise me to what Steve was saying, that they wrap up the Madeline Pryor storyline really quick. That's kind of what the show did. They gave you all these big hallmark series or hallmark moments of the comic, and they just kind of condensed it. So I don't know how long they can do that, because eventually you're going to catch up, but they can do it for a while.
And it's funny because that show crossed over was the Spider-Man 94 series. And the Spider-Man was the exact opposite. They would take like 1 issue and that would be like half a season.
This ain't Dragon Ball Z where they spend 5 episodes doing this.
Yeah. Like the recap is 5 minutes long. Then you have like some flashy build up, and then next time, I think it's still really good. Plus, they made some interesting choices because obviously the show is not. It's patterned. It's based on those original stories, and up to, literally up to probably season 4, it was just all Claremont stories. They have made some changes. They've made some taken some artistic license and narrative license with how they present some of these characters and some of these storylines. And I think that, it makes it something that's unique, even though it's giving us stories that we know, that we understand, that are part of the DNA of the X-Men, but it's presenting them in a different way where you don't necessarily know exactly what's going to happen next. Yeah. And I like that. I like that little bit of, hey, we're going to switch things around a little bit, make it a little bit more, difficult to predict, even though generally it's not that far off. But the Madeline Pryor one is a good example of that. So, like, if you watched up to episode 3, you know what they've changed. You know what's different about it. I mean, we didn't have a full Inferno. I don't think they could shove Inferno into 22 minutes, but they alluded to it, but just presented it very different way.
I also like to say that if some of these animators end up storyboarding action films, my God, these are some great action sequences in those first 2 episodes. Great action sequences.
So, are there any X-Men events that you guys would like to see them showcase that they haven't done before?
If they could get away with it, No More Mutants.
Okay.
And 198.
Yeah.
That would be really interesting to see how they would treat that. I think they would surprise you with who they would select. That I think, and it's funny because it's like, it's not even House of M. It's like what happens after House of M. That's what I would like to see.
I would like to see them do something with Whedon's Astonishing X-Men. Like, I know they did. I know there was an Astonishing X-Men, like it was its own thing, right? But I would like to see that done in this style. and really bring in, the White Queen. I would like to see more of her.
Okay.
Done like this. That'd be fun.
This is going to be kind of like weird and controversial, but I kind of want to see them do an AVX. Really try to see what they can do or how they can kind of connect it together to the greater Marvel universe, but also deal with, the splitting of the Phoenix into 5 parts and what that does to these mutants who now have the power, like a cosmic ability to destroy the world if they wanted to, and how they use that. And I think that was, it was fun to read. It was fun watching the fights, in AVX and that whole series. But having, Cyclops with the power of the Phoenix, or Magic with the power of Phoenix, or I think it'd just be really interesting to see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
To see how they would adapt it in something that would be, one and done in 22 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the other piece of news that we wanted to cover is something a bit more icky. I don't know who wants to take us through it. You're best qualified there, Caleb. So
yeah, I can to a point. So earlier this week, I don't even remember what day it was at this point because it's been kind of a thing. Some news started trickling out, right? You started seeing little things hit up on social media. A lot of it was, as you might expect, done on Twitter or X or whatever it's called these days. The stuff that I saw tend to be on Blue Sky because that's really the only thing I get on other than Facebook and Instagram anymore. But so apparently a kind of indie comics creator came out and said, hey, like, we need to really talk about some things. And Ed Piskor from, WYSIWYG fame, Hip Hop Family Tree, X-Men Grand Design, comic or cartoonist kayfabe. He's kind of a creep. And everybody was like, what? Like, what are you, like, what are you talking about? And she was like, well, like, dude, like, he kept sliding into my DMs when I was 17. Like, wanted to know things, was using like weird, like was calling me like a dirty girl, and had screenshots of everything. And it is very, very strange, but, also offered to, put her up in his spare bedroom should she come to Pittsburgh and want to do stuff. And it was very suggestive. There was no smoking gun, right? But it was very suggestive.
It's inappropriate.
Yeah. And so what it boiled down to is like, he's 40. He was sliding in my DMs, and it was very clear what he was looking for. I was a young, impressionable girl who wanted to break into comics, and this was another example of somebody using their, and again, according to Megan, who was using their status and their platform to go out there and say, hey, if you want to break in, then you need to do things, right? We saw something, we've seen this before. This was kind of the same thing that, now that I want to talk about it, I can't think of his name. Jason Aaron's partner on Southern Bastards, Jason Latour. Very, very similar to what Jason Latour was accused
Local
of.
boy.
So, but that started a trickle effect, right? Like once this hit the internet, other people started coming out, including somebody else who was like, yeah, no, he straight up told me if I wanted his editor's phone number, I had to suck him off. I was 18 or 19, and when that happened, according to the person, right? So it just kind of became kind of a thing where it's like, hey, this dude's almost 40, and he's looking for like barely legal folks to like slide into their DMs and maybe slide into other things. Caused a whole kerfluffle, and to the point that like at first I was just like, okay, what's going to happen with this? I mean, this is just a lot of internet noise, right? And it was until it wasn't, and then all of a sudden the cartoonist kayfabe channel went down. And the cartoonist kayfabe Slack went down, and all of their social media went away for a little bit. And then reports started coming in from people who were patrons of that podcast and stuff, who started saying, yeah, no, there's a lot of infighting right now. There's people at each other's throats. They're talking about getting rid of him. They're talking like, and of course I'm not in that group, so I have no idea the reality of that or not, but there was a lot of noise coming out of there saying, hey, they're trying to distance themselves from him, but no one knows what's happening. Though the cartoonist kayfabe sites have since come back up, his Ed Pisker's sites have not, although there is reports of like a sock puppet account that he may or may not be operating. I have no idea. Not interested in knowing if it's true, right? It's just weird drama.
Yeah.
All it boils down to, from my perspective, is no matter who you are, or number one, there are appropriate ways to talk to people. Number two, no matter who you are, do not use your status and platform to offer people an opportunity at a career in exchange for sex. That is a no-no. Do not do that. It is weird, especially if you're in this weird power dynamic, male, older guy, younger girl thing. It's not going to end well for you. And we, for better or worse, we live in the age of, and look, this is something that we've all talked about. Personally, like people want to throw around phrases like cancel culture. I always respond to that. Cancel culture is not real. It's just consequence culture. And we live in a place of court of public opinion. No one's entitled to celebrity. That's always been my take on it. You may garner some favor and stuff like that, but no one's entitled to it. You can still go get a job at Burger King. It is what it is, right? That's just the world we live in. If you get to a certain level, like bad things can happen. Hope it doesn't happen to any of us, right? And hopefully it shouldn't, and there shouldn't be any receipts for this kind of thing. But it just is what it is, and it should not happen. So we're gonna have to see. We're gonna have to see what comes out of this. I know Ed Pisker was supposed to have a very big, there was a local art studio or art space that was showing his work and stuff that was really going to focus on him. That's been canceled.
Yeah,
and they're in Pittsburgh, right? Like it's like so.
And people also have to understand, like, the art world in Pittsburgh post Andy Warhol is it's a major part of their culture.
Yeah,
it's a major part of that city's culture. It's not like most other cities. I mean, you have people you never think would be going to galleries go to galleries regularly in that region. So that's a bigger deal than it would be in some other areas.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too that's kind of interesting with this. So this isn't the first time that Pisker's been, courting drama or courting, controversy. A lot of stuff that he did with Red Room, and his writing partner, art partner, cartoonist kayfabe partner, Jim Rugg, worked on together. That has come up and almost resulted in them getting, canceled or consequenced, really. But what's really interesting to me is that they are a major part of the HeroesCon experience. They've been, they've had sort of like the head table, so to speak, in the island section. Yeah, they're always center square.
They're the center square, to use the Hollywood squares.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, and they have, they always have one of the most popular panels, and there's a lot of people that they've brought on that they've, made big or at least introduced to a wider audience just by, the nature of their exposure. So, having cartoonist kayfabe as a platform feel this blowback in such a major way that they really haven't before is pretty telling to me, I think. In that it goes beyond just sort of like making light of the Holocaust on a variant cover, or being shocking about stuff that, oh my gosh, I can't believe they drew that, or I can't believe that they are writing about that. Like, that's just, some of it's taste level, some of it's sort of, our consumer. But this kind of goes down to just, the way a person kind of comports themselves in an industry that has a history of this kind of sort of gatekeeping through sex, gatekeeping, especially, the older man and the younger artist, or at least, especially in this case, the younger female artist or writer. It's just creepy and icky, and I think a lot of people kind of feel that and understand that. They're not, I think it's less easy to defend that.
Yeah, it seems with this one, there's fewer knee-jerk reactions.
Yeah,
than some other controversies have generated.
Well, and I mean, Steve, you hit on the kind of controversy that came out of Red Room and some of the other stuff that they've done. I want to make it clear, like, I've got, there's a lot of stuff about this whole scenario that frustrates me, right? Every time this happens, you always hear people go, all of a sudden, oh, it was known. It's a loud secret in the group. Number one, no, fuck off with that, right? Like if you know about something like this and you're staying quiet about it, then go away. Like you're part of the problem, right? I hate this idea that, oh well, it was a quiet secret. Then say something.
Yeah.
Say why did you seriously?
Why keep it a secret?
Yeah.
This isn't 1964.
Say something,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Why are you waiting? Right. If you knew about it, blow the whistle. Right. I hate that because it's always people are like, well, I was in on something that nobody else was. Right. Okay.
You're complicit, baby.
Yeah. I was going to say, A, you're complicit, and B, you're being a drama vulture. That's it. Right. You're being a drama. A, no, you didn't. You didn't know. You're not part of the in crowd, Mr. I like listen to popcorn on the internet. Like you're not. So stop. Right. We're talking about real lives. And that's the thing that bugs me the most. But that's just what it is. I can separate real life from art, right? I actually really, really, really like subversive art. Some of my favorite books were subversive at the time, right? Stuck Rubber Baby, right? That was a subversive book that when it was put out, when it was made, was taboo, right? Like it was just a thing you didn't see, right? Subversive is one thing. Even if you want to be distasteful, right? That's fine. It's art. Like like the First Amendment is a real thing. Be distasteful, be subversive to a point. That we can like or dislike on its merits because it's art.
Absolutely.
This is real life. If you are using your position to keep somebody out of a career or to promise them things in operation for sex, that is abuse. This is real. These are separate things, right? I can dislike Ed Piskor, and I do, for lots of reasons, including the fact that once he got his little platform on Cartoonist Kafluffer or whatever it's called, he decided to call a shit ton of my friends who take work for the big two jobbers and opportunists and sellouts and everything else for taking jobs to put money on the table. Meanwhile, this motherfucker's biggest paycheck comes from Marvel.
Yeah.
I can dislike him for that because that's just him being a douchebag, right? Wholly separate. So that's one of the things that I cannot stand is like we when people see this stuff and they want to weigh in as if they were in the know when they weren't, right? Or when they say I always knew, or they can look at art and say, and that's the thing, right? Like, yes, it's weird and creepy, but we have to be able to separate it. You can make disturbing art. You can make Hannibal Lecter without being a serial killer cannibal. You can make Red Room without like diving into that, right? Like you cannot go look at everybody who makes subversive art as if, oh, they're really bad people in real life. Should not be doing that. But if you're a real person in real life and you're doing these bad things, no remorse, no time for you whatsoever, right? Just if you see something, say something. I mean, it really is that simple.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of at the heart of it too. If people know about it and they kept quiet, then they support that kind of behavior. And there was some initial grumbling about like, well, why did they wait so long? Did they wait until they had a little bit more success or whatever before they came out and talked about it? Like, that doesn't matter. That really doesn't matter. Timing doesn't really matter when it comes to exposing abuse for what it is, unless you knew about it earlier and you were not the person. Like, you may not have been the person doing it, but you knew about it and you didn't say anything. You're essentially saying that you support that behavior and that you appreciate that behavior. It doesn't matter how good of an artist or writer you are. If you do things like, you mentioned Jason Latour. I mean, co-creator of Spider-Gwen. Southern Bastards, one of my favorite books of all time.
Yep. Massively talented. Ed Piskor's massively talented. Massively talented.
Doesn't say anything about like their ability to spin a tale or draw something that draws you in. It does say something about their own personal character if they are terrible people, and they get called out. And it's like it's not anybody else's fault that they got called out. It is their own fault that they got called out because they shouldn't have done it, and Ed should not have been creepy. Actually, if he was, and a lot has been made about like the age difference. If he was 22 and doing this to a 17-year-old, it still would be gross because he's using his position of power. He's using his, his platform or like the fact that he's representing a bigger platform and has the exposure and is a known person. You can't do that.
Well, look, and if
Just
at
can't
the
do
end of the
that.
day, if you're into younger folks, you're into younger like that, like so. I don't want to also make it sound like oh, if you're of a certain age, you can't. Like, if you want to get on
Yeah,
Grindr or whatever and find a twink, a 19-year-old, and bang it out, like go do you, right? That's not the problem. The problem is the gatekeeping, right? The problem is
yeah,
the quid pro quo. If you
yeah.
do these things, I might introduce you to the right people. Like that's
It's
the
it's just
part that
gross.
gets me.
That's gross. But also, even if the like, I'll introduce you to the right people if you do these things. But also, the hitting on underage people and like being really gross. The whole like naughty girl, dirty girl kind of talk
Yeah,
was a little. Yeah, this isn't Lolita. Lolita is not a blueprint for how you should live your life.
it is, but not really an in defense of kind of situation. But I will say in the text messages and stuff that the receipts that were put online and everything, he did say, "Are you 17 or 18?" Like again, probably shouldn't be in a situation to ask that question. But to his defense, like he did say, "Wait, are you 17 or 18?" Oh shit, you're 17. God damn it! So like but also
That's also a little like, don't even say it. Don't even get to that
anytime
point.
you have to start an argument to rebut yourself with, well, the age of consent law is, yeah, you're not gonna, it's not gonna work out well. You've already lost the war. Like you're just, but it's just, it aggravates me. And I will say to no end, at least in this time, I did not see a lot of people rushing to do the white knight defense or anything like that. So
Yeah.
I will say maybe we're just past that point. So I hope. I'm not going to wish ill will on anybody, right? Like I don't know the truth. I'm not a finder of, as I tell people in my day job all the time, I'm not a judge. I'm not a finder of fact. I'm here to advise, but that's it, right? But I wish the best for everybody. Hopefully this works out in the best way possible and there are no more victims or whatever. I really feel bad for Jim Rugg and Tom Scioli because at least they have done nothing wrong that we know of. I don't know
of that. That's
and I want to caveat
there's
that.
a gray area there.
Yeah,
because,
we don't know what they knew. We don't know what they didn't know, right? But they are
Scaly,
very,
I think there's enough distance, but
Yeah.
Rugg, I think that's if they've been in each other's pockets for that long, we don't know.
Yeah.
All right, enough ick.
On to happier thoughts.
On to happier things like the emotional trauma that always is the X-Men. All right, so Steve, you have actually like a cluster of books you want to talk about. So why don't we start off with you?
It's funny that you should say the word cluster. So I'm going to be talking about the 1-2 Punch miniseries that is essentially wrapping up the Krakoan era X-Men, and that is Rise of the Powers of X. I have to get this. I have to read it to get it right. Rise of Powers of X, or Powers of 10, and Fall of the House of X. So Rise of and Fall of, or as I have put very nicely right down there, Ropox and Fohawks, is basically the wrap up, the final two miniseries that are wrapping up the Krakoan saga. And let me see if I can put them up here. I am going to actually start with the one that takes place 10 years or ish in the future, and that is Rise of the Powers of X. So both of these books do take place in different years. So Rise takes place about 10 years into the future, sort of like the Krakoa plus 10 era that we were sort of vaguely introduced into a possible version of way back in the days of Fox Fox. And in this one, it's looking pretty bleak. Not just for the mutants of Earth, but for Earth as a whole. Earth has just been absolutely decimated by the war between Orcus, well, Nimrod, and the Omega Sentinel, and all the remaining mutants on Earth. And it's pretty devastating. There are humans that are still around, but even then, a lot of them are basically just pawns of Orcus at this point. just turning in other humans or fighting alongside of them, just used as cannon fodder, more or less. And there are very few mutants left. The mutants that are fighting on the side of Professor X, are essentially, you have Professor himself, you've got Cypher, and you've got Rachel, formerly known as the other Phoenix, Rachel Summers. The three of them, along with Rasputin the Fourth, are kind of holding fort in this weird space outside of time, the no space. And the people who are kind of the foot soldiers who are fighting, trying to, get something done. We've got Captain Krakoa, aka Miss Marvel. You've got what is Shadowcat now after ingesting a legacy virus and becoming sort of like this super, mutant thing. You've still got Wolverine because, of course, you can't ever have a book without Wolverine, even if it's in the far future. You've also got Sync, as well as the ghost of Tony Stark, Iron Man. It's basically an AI version of Tony Stark before he was murdered that inhabits the suit that he built, sort of like a nano.
Quick question: Who's in the Blue Beetle costume there?
The Blue Beetle costume, that is Iron Man. Well, AI Tony Stark.
That's the ghost of Tony Stark
ghost of Tony Stark. Yeah. So everybody.
I see Iron Man now, and not Blue Beetle. Okay.
Yeah, it's Iron Man-ish.
Okay. Yeah.
But Kieran Gillen's writing this, and it's very bleak. There's a lot of like really awesome action, some beautiful artwork in this by Sylvan. I forgot his first name. But you've also got a lot of work with Rasputin the Fourth. So they're fighting for their lives, more or less, a losing battle. And one of the things that we find out with Nimrod here sort of leading the charge along with Omega Sentinel against the remainders of the X-Men here, is that really the whole purpose is to bring about a Dominion. They are looking to bring in sort of an extra universal force that's going to recognize their ascendancy, and they will, ascend to this next plane of existence. Something, again, that was referred to way back in Hawk's Past, back in the day, of sort of like, how humanity then evolves, into, godlike beings, but then beyond godlike beings, something beyond the universe. And that's kind of their whole ploy. They're going to destroy all the X-Men. They've completely decimated all of humanity just by being there. So what's remaining of Orchis, which is Nimrod and and Omega Sentinel, are going to be turning this on. Now there is one other person as well, and that is Dr. Stasis, one of the many clones of good old Mr. Sinister, whose idea it was to sort of bring in the Dominion earlier, like 1,000 years earlier than it should have happened. And it turns out that this is something that has been tried many, many times before, of course, by all the other Sinister clones in several of the other books that we've seen. Interestingly enough, it's already happened. Sinister has already become a Dominion. We knew this if you were reading some of the other books recently, the Sins of Sinister that I talked about earlier last year. It's become clear that a Sinister has ascended to become a Dominion. Just that Sinister itself. And interestingly enough, has been doing its hardest to stop any other Sinister from becoming a Dominion too, including the plans of this sort of like weird, Orchis, Nimrod sort of centered reality. And, no matter how hard the X-Men are fighting here, it is a losing battle. They are going to lose. There's nothing that they can do. It's all going to go to crap. Everybody's going to die, and there's going to be Dominion formed. Except for the fact that it's already been formed. They've already kind of lost, but then so has Dr. Stasis and Nimrod and everybody else, because somebody else has already beat them there. So, in order to save everything, Professor X, Cypher, and Rachel and Rasputin sort of work on a plan together to find a way to go back in time to Moira McTaggart for right before she first realizes her ability as a mutant to reset the universe. And that's kind of where they leave things off um, in Rise 3. Now, or sorry, Fall 3. Oh my gosh, I totally, I'm already going into Fall. So it is kind of confusing, but they're all working about this in the future. In the past, and we're going to go bring this up now, Fall of the House of X. um, things are really dire for the X-Men. We've got Cyclops, who is basically up, doing a trial of Magneto. He's going to be on trial for basically representing all the mutants. And he's in prison essentially, being held to be put up for trial. You've got Colossus and Wolverine trying to break him out. You've got the White Queen kind of doing her thing underground, trying to keep all the pieces on the board and free Cyclops as well. But in prison, Dr. Gregor of the Orcus Foundation meets with Cyclops because she has realized something very interesting about her organization. She doesn't trust it anymore. She knows that Nimrod, who is based on the brain scan of her husband, is, and also Omega Sentinel has a very separate plan for everything, and it's very interesting. She actually helps get Cyclops out of prison along with magic. We also have the good old daughter of Magneto, Polaris, who brings with her the well-known home of the Guardians of the Galaxy, the dead head of a Celestial, to the battle with Orcus in orbit. And it's absolutely crazy and shocking. You've also got Dr. Stasis around as well. You've got all sorts of things that are happening here. Lots of great action. I'm trying to compress this a lot because there's just so much going on. Lots of really cool action in space. You've got two swords that are crossed. You've got all these things that are happening. And of course, this is tying in with what's happening in Rise as well. Back and forth with the plans to go back in time and make sure that Moira never really resets the universe or resets it in the same way. And with all of these things going on, the newest issue of Fall just released yesterday. There is a very shocking death. And I'm not going to show what that is. I'm not going to spoil that for anybody. But it's all it's going a little crazy. And I love it. I love how over the top this is. I love how Kieran Gillen and Dugan are really kind of playing with all of these characters together, throwing the most horrible things at them. Tons of action, just really, really cool. But it's, of course, just doing the usual apocalyptic X-Men story where everything's going to get really horrible, everything's going to go horribly wrong, and then somehow something will fix it. And I do love the craziness of it. I do love reading these back to back. I think that there's so much going on here. But, we are getting points where I think even diehard fans are going to say, okay, just end it. just end it. We want to see the universe implode. We want to see the timeline just fold in on itself. What are we going to do? How is this going to end? How can we get back to a new status quo and reset everything post-Krakoa? We've got only a couple months left when all the books, line-wide are going to end. But I am going to be continuing to follow this. It is just wild. I wish Brian were here so he could talk about it, because I know this is, this X-Men insanity is bread and butter for him. But I'm enjoying it. I love these action scenes that they're putting in here. I love the characters that they've gone with as sort of like the final bulwark for humanity as well as for mutantdom. But yeah, if you have not been reading X-Men up to this point, or any of the X books, or have any idea what's been going on, you'll be so lost. Um, but I do have to give them credit for pulling so much back to Hoxpox, to House of X and Powers of 10. What started this whole thing. They do refer to that a lot. They do give a lot of credence to Hickman's original design for this. Almost forgetting the past 3 years of Krakoan storytelling just to kind of get back to that point. And I do appreciate that. But yeah, I think is anybody are you guys reading this at all?
I'm woefully behind. I've got them. They're stacked up.
The last X-Men book I read was Inferno.
Oh, okay.
The
new Inferno, the old Inferno,
the Hickman Inferno.
Yeah. I do have to say, I love these covers.
I'm done. I'm done.
I love these covers. I love the work that's been done. I think it's I want to say that the person who's been doing most of the covers, Pepe Larraz and Marta Garcia.
Pepe Larraz is a beast.
I mean, this is a beautiful, beautiful image. I love these. And
colors.
I like this one too, like Dr. Stasis with Wolverine's claw right on it. And, not to say it's that never happened in the book, but, close enough. Really, really fun stuff.
You were showing the interiors, and one thing I do want to, I love Pepe Larraz, right? That dude set the mold for this era of the mutants. He really did. And they've done a really good job pulling in artists who fit into what Pepe Larraz looks like, right? People of the same school. Very few people. I mean, no one's going to be him, right? And very few people can come close. But they are pulling in some artists. I think Silva is one of them that are, they're similar.
Yeah, Silva. I think just the layouts alone. Just the way that he presents a lot of this stuff is it's gorgeous. And everything seems to be this is definitely a title where they threw a lot of talent at. I mean, Gillen and Duggan, as telling these twin stories. They're not even bookend stories. They're interwoven completely, even though they take place in different timelines. But it's just, it's a lot. It's a lot to read in what's ultimately going to be, I think, probably about 10 issues worth of story. It's also kind of pricey. The first issues for both of them come in at $5.99, and then the rest of the issues are $4.99. I would say it's worth it because they are longer. They do have more page count here. But yeah, it's kind of like I guess this is going to be the path forward once it gets rebooted. I think everything's going to be $4.99 at least. That's what I've been seeing more and more. So, it's a lot.
Thank you, Steve. Caleb, who has 2 independent books.
I do. So I will start with the one from our friends over at Fantagraphics. And to start with that, I have a couple of questions. I assume you both, at least know of John Coltrane's "A Love Supreme." Mm-hmm. Most people, I think, even if you're in super and jazz, hang on. Okay, I'm back.
A little internet stutter. There we go. We can hear you.
We're waiting for you, baby.
All right, I should be back now.
Cool. There we go.
All right, yeah, I like that it waits till I start talking to start doing anything. It's been fine the whole time. Anyway, fucking gremlins. So I assume both of you are familiar with John Coltrane's "A Love Supreme," right?
Mm-hmm.
Like most people, even if you're not into jazz,
resolution, pursuance.
Yeah,
song. I know.
But are you familiar with the philosophy of "A Love Supreme"?
Yes.
Okay,
but I'm not like other people. Yeah.
Right. So a lot of people may not know, like they've heard John Coltrane's "A Love Supreme," but they may not understand the philosophy behind that, which really is what John Coltrane was trying to do, was to take and essentially tell kind of an existentialist, but also universalist story about spirituality based on the like African American history and the Black experience in the United States, or what would become the United States throughout the whole thing, right? There's a whole built-in idea behind the behind that, right? This religion and the Black experience. So the reason I bring that up, right, is because in order to really, I think, truly appreciate the book that I'm going to talk about now, go listen to John Coltrane's Love Supreme. Take like an hour of your life and just Google the philosophy of Love Supreme. Catch yourself up on it, because you need that background to really, really understand this new book from Fantagraphics, which is called The N-Word of God by Mark Dukes, written and drawn by Mark Dukes. This book is hard to talk about for a couple different reasons, right? And just the very obvious reason is because I'm very white. Like, which makes it like, obviously, like there's a lot that goes into this that is like, I can only recount it, right? I can only take somebody's word for it, right? Mark Dukes is a very interesting individual. At some point in his life, he decided to become an Eastern Orthodox monk at a monastery in Texas. And Mark Dukes is a Black man. He's a Black American man, right? When you think about Eastern Orthodox Christianity, you don't typically think about Black men. You don't really typically think about Texans. But, so somewhere in that line, there's a monastery in Texas that's an Eastern Orthodox church. And he becomes a monk there. And he lives as a monk there for a little bit. And then he realizes, hey, this is not for me. This is not adding up to what I want. So he leaves and he moves to San Francisco, and he joins a church that is basically that their patron saint is John Coltrane. And all of that history of his life culminates into him really trying to figure out how to contextualize being Black in America and the religious experience. And so what he does with the N-Word of God is he rewrites Christian history. Like he almost he adopts it, he adapts it, and he appropriates it, right? And so what he delivers in this book is a history of how God made the world, and it's basically a conversation between himself, or the narrator, and largely this figure called Saint Sambo. So he goes through this whole thing where he talks about just kind of the initial version, the initial culmination of Genesis, where God separated the light and dark, right? This first time that you really take color or race or identity, right? And you separate them, and light is deemed as positive in the first books of Genesis, and dark is deemed as negative. And he goes from there, this conversation with Saint Sambo about how, look, this was set up to have a whole universe that righteousness equals righteousness, and he delivers this story, which is just, like I said, it's just this exposition. It's a conversation of how we got to where we are now, largely using Christian iconography. And he goes into the different elements of culture. He goes into the, how, the slave trade brought Africans to America, and then they were given Christianity, and how that morphed, and now you have a very strong Christian movement in the United States, but it's based off of, at least in his opinion, and this is an opinion I would agree with, right? But it's based off of a very white supremacist ideology, and he plays with that. He says, what does this say? So how does this tie into modern iconography? And what he is, as you can see from the pictures that we're showing, what he ends up with is this very iconoclastic piece of literature, with these absolutely stunning and just truly gorgeous recreations of Eastern Christian iconography that show Black people in there. And there's a lot of subversive messaging in this, but the whole book really just, again, it's hard to talk about what it is because it's largely a conversation. He is trying to figure out what to do from a very academic perspective, what to do with Blackness, what to do with religion, what to do with the way that he feels about it, with his own personal history, with the history of the world, with the history and the development of Black religion in America. And he's trying to figure out how to contextualize it. and ultimately, I don't know that he really ends on an answer. He uses kind of he uses imagery of blackface. He uses things like Aunt Jemima, right? He uses Sambo. He obviously uses John Coltrane in here. He uses these figures that are put out and post out, sent out into the world as kind of this just depictions of blackness in some form or another in our everyday modern life. And he asks us to see what these things do, how they work, how you are. And this image is actually very, very well timely put, Steve, because largely what he's saying is, in a world in America where racism is a thing, right? But where both white people and black people, the predominant religion is Christianity, why we still have this gulf in between them, and why we still have racism that exists in a religion largely predominated on the sense of love your neighbor as yourself. And again, I'm not going to speak as, I can't speak of this from personal experience. I read the book. I love the book. The book is very subversive. There are things in there that, make me scratch my head. I don't know. There are things in there that I think are really interesting, right? I would love to know more. I would love to have a conversation with Mr. Dukes. But by and large, the way that the book is delivered, the artwork, it's a very postmodern book, right? So it's you have words over here and you have pictures over here. It's not a comic in the sense of we think about them. It's not, they are juxtaposed, but those are not panels. He just shows you these large pieces of work that are meant to give you an idea and really play off stereotypes to make you think. And I like books, whether I agree with them or not, right? I like books that make me think. And so I was really happy to see this, really happy to read it. I love books that again, tap into history, that tap into culture, that tap into philosophy. I think they're fun. I think they're interesting. And I think that they are a big part of the texture of literary comics. So I would love to know what other people who have read this think about it, good, bad, or otherwise. But for me, it's a very strong work, right? I don't have to, it doesn't have to be a universal truth to be a strong work for me. I thought it was just a very, very an incredible accomplishment that exists at all. And again, it made me think, and it upended a lot of the way that I've viewed some of the things in the world. So I really think it's something worthwhile. I'm glad Fantagraphics was able to publish this. And where we just spent some time talking about another artist who was, is considered a subversive artist to some degree, and has a big platform and didn't really do a whole lot with it other than what he did with it. This is interesting to me, and I'd like to see more of this.
Yeah, I mean, I like how he's for creating these images. It's really interesting that he, of course, was an Orthodox monk, because this is very much Orthodox art.
Yeah.
This is Orthodox iconography.
That was my comment. That was the comment.
But it's like iconoclastic iconography. So it's like, yes, in a way, it's breaking itself to create something new. And I love the art. I love the art.
That's one of the things.
It makes me feel uncomfortable in certain, like some of the imagery, of course, is discomforting, because it's it plays on a stereotypical image, or certain things that get thrown in, where that they have a history of sort of like racist imagery, but it's being repurposed in this really interesting way, and with sort of in a very religious medium, and I think that's really, it's really unique, and I'm curious to. I don't know if I could pick this up in most places, because I'm sure most places wouldn't normally carry it because of the fact that it's so controversial.
Yeah. What is the price point on this, Caleb?
So according to the back of the book, it's $29.99, but it's a thick book. It's a hardcover. It's very well done. I mean, look, just the, like, this is, like, I opened a page that I can actually show on, and there's some pages that I'm not going to show on here, right? Like, but Steve, like, You are absolutely right when you point out the fact, and Bill, you were saying this too. Like I saw when I started researching this book, because I really wanted to figure out how to talk about it. I really wanted to figure out how I could contextualize it for a book that's trying to contextualize another thing. And I got online and I saw an individual who was making a very some good points, but he said, "Hey, look, at the end of one thing we need to talk about is this is cultural appropriation." And I found it interesting that he made that comment. On the back of the book, it flat out says on the back of the book, he is appropriating these things to prove a point. But the minute I saw that, I was like, yes and no. This book is iconoclastic. That's the difference. And to the point that it does make you uncomfortable, it reminds me of like Lovecraft Country, right? Where you get the little dancing girls in that scene and it's doing something different. It should make you uncomfortable, right? Like this is not comfort food. This is art that makes you uncomfortable to certain degrees. And I think it makes everyone uncomfortable. I mean, I read an interview where he's talking about, he's like, no, this stuff makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
To produce something that is disturbing yourself, to produce something that inherently asks you, who am I as a human, and to make people feel uneasy, right? That's not an easy thing to do. And to produce a piece of work that is 366 pages long of that tells a very cohesive story and ends an amazing conversation. It's a book I'm not going to forget.
Wow. Yeah.
The other question I have is that you mentioned the pretty high page count, but also taking into consideration the structure of the book. How long a read was that?
It took me, so I read it in 2 days in 2 different chunks, right? And when we talk about, so you have some books that or some pages, this is the text on.
Yeah.
You can read those pretty quick, but
I just didn't have an idea of what.
I mean, a lot of the majority, I'm sorry about the lighting. The majority of the pages are like that, right? Like it's a chunk of text. So you're getting full robust reading. Like if you broke down just the text alone, there's probably 100, 110 pages of full text to this. So it's a lot. And sometimes, again, it's a literal conversation that he's having with these figures, with Saint Sambo. Sometimes it's a literal conversation that he's having with God. And then sometimes he's just laying out a narrative of the history of the universe and how these things were made. And he really does it. One of the things that I haven't really spoke about, I can't spend too much time on it, but the way that he plays with language is very interesting. Like, again, one of the biggest keys is righteousness and righteousness, right? He plays with language in a very interesting way to show you the overlap and how these things affect history, which I thought was kind of fascinating from somebody who, took linguistic classes and has an interest in those things, because I'm a nerd.
Yeah, I do think if you listen to the show instead of watch, you're at a tremendous disadvantage right now with this segment, because it would be very hard to provide adequate descriptions of.
Go to Google. Go to Google. Go and look at what's offered there.
Yeah. Cool. And what's the other book?
Oh, I forgot. I'm the Caleb sandwich. So the other book actually comes from our friends over at Boom Studios, and it is rare. It's another book. I'm apparently into culture tonight. Rare Flavors is written by somebody who is quickly becoming one of my favorite writers in comics right now, Ram V, with Felipe Andrade on the art. And oh my God, when I say Felipe Andrade is doing work with this art, it is stunning, right? There is just something about this that it is some next level stuff. It's that kind of, for those of you who are looking, he's got a very thin line. He's not photorealistic. It's almost, he's taking portions of cartooning and making it look a little bit like woodblock art, and just giving you some whole different levels of texture. It's almost got like a little bit of James Stokoe, but not a bunch of James Stokoe in the way that he does his lines and everything. It's just, he's got a fascinating style. But the book largely is, it is, I guess if I had to give the elevator pitch for it, what happens when a Indian eternal demon really falls in love with food and culture. When an Indian cannibalistic demon falls in love with food and culture and wants to really experience that and create something that will last and stand the test of time. And so that's what you have here. This demon is a type of demon called a Rashaka. I'm probably mispronouncing that. And he is, at least to the degree that we understand it, he's immortal, right? He's been around for a very, very, very long time. And he's also a cannibalistic demon, but and that's bearing the lead a little bit. You don't find that out till at the end of the first series, really, right? But he falls in love with flavor, right? He falls in love with he's watched Stephen Bourdain too many times, if that's such a thing. By the way, you can't, right? Stephen Bourdain is a fascinating person. Is just
Anthony Bourdain.
Sorry, my brain.
Anthony.
Yeah, Anthony Bourdain. Yeah,
Anthony
Bourdain. He's delved into that psychology, right? And so what he wants to do is create something that really celebrates that, but in the way that only he can. So he goes and he finds a young man, a struggling filmmaker who's kind of given up on life. And he says, look, I want to pay you. I want to create a documentary. And what we're going to do is we're going to go around India, right? We're going to do the Anthony Bourdain thing where we travel around and we find out how things are really made. Like, we're going to go find the field where the spices are grown. We're going to tell you the history of them. We're going to find the people who harvest those things, right? We're going to find everything that makes our culture and our food something unique and special. And we're going to talk about the spirit of it. And we're going to talk about these rare flavors, right? And they do that much to the young cinematographer's chagrin at first. He's kind of hesitant. He's like, yeah, I don't want to. I've already hung up my camera. Don't want to get into that. But he's, with money and time, he coaxes him into doing it and really touches on the artistic side of him. So they go on this adventure. Again, the young man does not realize that the Rashaka is a cannibal. And so part of what they're doing is they go all around and they find these places and people. He will go off and then come back with a meal of some exquisitely cooked food. It's a human, right? It is taking all of the spices and the flavors and the processes of cooking these foods, and he's doing it with human flesh and making something beautiful out of murder, to some degree. Meanwhile, in the background of all of this, he's not the only immortal, right? He's not the only person who knows about this, and he's being hunted. There are people whose legacies are tracking him down and trying to get rid of him. And for the most part, he has stayed off the radar for a couple hundred years, so no one knew where he was. But now he's reemerged, so to speak, and he's making waves and noise. And these hunters are going to find him. I love food. Like I love the culinary experience. Like the last time I was in Chicago, right, I met up with our friend Arnie, and we went and spent way too much money on a 3 Michelin star meal, right? Because of the experience, because of what was in it, and just because to say we can't, right? I love food. I love Anthony Bourdain. I like the experience of travel. I like the culture. I like seeing other worlds. I like knowing how the sauce is made, so to speak. And I like knowing the history of the sauce. I like knowing how the love goes into it. I like knowing how certain spices made their way from Portugal and were cultivated and loved in arid climates that they were not naturally supposed to be in, and what that did for it, right? I also like mythology, and I like history, and I like the weird, almost political machinations that are written into Ram V's stories. And it's not really fair to say political, but that may not even be the right word. But right, he's like telling you how, almost geopolitically, how these things work, or how they should be viewed, or at least how, in his opinion, they should be viewed. And he's doing that here with gorgeous art and a gorgeous premise and a fun premise. And he's taking you on a wild ride. And I can't recommend it enough. This is already on the short list for one of my favorite books this year. And And they do the thing, right? They tell you how to make certain dishes. There's recipes in this, right? There's things that go into how you should prepare these meals. So fun book. Glad Boom is publishing it. Cannot wait to read more. Also he's kind of a bearish dude with a mustache that smokes a lot of cigars, and that's a thing. So it's not bad either. I could deal without the murder teeth, but that's just a personal.
Well, murder teeth. So this looks to me, is this I don't want to say continuation or sequel, but does it tie in at all with Ramvi's last book that I think he did with him, The Many Lives of Lila Starr?
Yeah, I don't think so. They could, but I don't think they do. But he, in both books, he kind of plays into kind of the proto-Indian mythologies, right? So I mean, there is a shared kind of thing, which he did the same thing in Swamp Thing too. So
right.
But I could see him tying them together. But I think this kind of stands alone, and it is singular in and of itself. But he's writing what he knows to some degree. He was born and raised in Mumbai, so this is part of his world that he's bringing now to a Western audience. So there's gonna be a lot of crossover and a lot of things that seem to overlap in his stories.
My question is, and this is from we got a comment, so Steve, why don't you?
Oh yeah. Daniel Williamson says, I read the first couple issues, but I suspect it probably works better as a trade. Kind of like a European comic book.
I can see that. I only have the first 3 issues, so I've read up to the first 3 issues. So I can't speak to whether it would work better as a trade, right? Ram V is a writer that sometimes I think his stuff works better in trade. Layla Starr, I think, works better in a trade form, right?
Yeah. And that was what I read all in floppies.
Yeah, Swamp Thing I can read issue to issue. This I'm reading issue to issue. I think I think this one, it really does. It could go either way. It just depends on what mood you're in.
Yeah.
Did Felipe Andrade do the cover?
As far as I know, yes. It looks like him. Let me.
Boom is usually really good about presentations out cover. Take a look at that. What the hell was that?
I did a demon. We got a demon.
Okay. Anyway, Steve, if you can just put that up, this is just the world that I come out of. To me, this is very reminiscent of the work of James McMullen, who was the principal artist for Lincoln Center Theater. I just sent you guys a bunch of images on our thread, and that was the first thing that came to mind. So I was just wondering, apart from the elements that you presented in your conversation there, Caleb, was there a theatrical element to this as well?
Well, to a degree. And by the way, yes, Philip Andrade did the covers.
Okay, great.
To a degree, right? Because one of your main characters is a filmmaker. So they do show, and in showing different places, they show some elements of theater, but not overtly. No.
Yeah.
Most of
I mean about that in structure, not necessarily about
in structure. Yeah, in structure, it would not be hard to adapt this into a play. The hardest part to adapt this into a play would be the scenery, because they do go out into the more remote areas. But the parts that were done in I think Mumbai, into the very setting the scene would be the hardest part. But other than that, yes, there is a little bit of a theatrical element to this, but that could have just been a vibe.
Yeah. Because what I took away from that, McMullen is excellent at taking a singular image, which may not be the predominant image of a production, and yet in his hands you get a very good sense of what you're in for, and that cover did that for me. Like things you mentioned were not a surprise just because of the cover image that was presented. That's a very peculiar talent.
In the first issue alone, one of my favorite parts, and it's really how he coaxes the guy into signing on for him. There's like a 3-page story, like inner story of how to make a certain type of chai tea
Mhm.
that this person's grandmother made, and it goes into how to boil the milk and how you do a double boiler, and just like the way that they talk about food is
Mhm.
it's almost sexual, like it's almost spiritual to a point, right? Like it is sensual,
Mhm.
but it's also like you're talking, like the way they talk about food is like talking about family history, um, to some degree. So and there are several moments like that in the book. So high watermark on this
Okay,
one.
cool. I was
Um,
not expecting to talk about James McMullen on this podcast.
See what you get.
Yeah.
You got John Coltrane, James McMullen.
Yeah.
It's, so I've been kind of falling down on my duties with the comments, but Victor Rose, who also is joining us on YouTube, on the N Word of God by Dukes, he did say here death sounds interesting. So thanks very much. And then also Daniel Williamson did say great show by the way. So thank you, Daniel. I listen to podcasts but not watch live before. Greetings from Finland.
Oh, hi.
Oh,
Hi.
That's awesome.
it's really late or really early there. So
Yeah. I hope we
greetings.
didn't scare you off with our faces here.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to go back to Big Two talk. It's not been a secret. I've talked about this on this show that I've been dealing with a waning interest that I've had in comic books, and with that, I have a huge backlog. So I'm starting to whittle it down, and I'm, again, because DC is the majority of my reading at this point. Um, I'm attacking the number ones right now and taking it from there. And there was a number one that I really enjoyed. There was also a number one that I read that I didn't enjoy nearly as much, but there was enough of a hook to keep me in and keep me interested in what goes beyond this. The first book I want to talk about is Wonder Woman #1. I think this came out like November or so. Was it
Yeah,
about
just about 4 months
November?
ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3 4 months
And
ago.
you'll see there a new era begins. And this is the era of Tom King as the writer and Daniel. Is it Semper or Semperi? Does anybody know how that's pronounced? On art? He does a stunning job.
Yeah, he does.
He does a
It's
stunning job.
gorgeous.
And he's
It's
asked to
gorgeous.
do a lot. He's asked to do um, very bloody moments, very action oriented moments, very geographic moments. I mean, there's a depiction of the Washington Monument that is probably the best depiction of um, a real life facility ever in comics. And I'm not, I'm not blowing smoke up and, uh, um, being grandiose about that. It's that good. Um, so what happens in Wonder Woman? What happens in this new era? Okay, the story begins not in Themyscira and not in Washington D.C., but in a bar in Montana.
Yep.
And a woman there is trying to finish up a game of pool, and she finally finds herself on the receiving end of some unwanted male attention and some harassment. It turns out she's an Amazon, and or at least is believed to be an Amazon, and she kills every man in the place. The only two survivors of the 19 people that were in that bar are the two women. And this hits a vibe in our country. And I have to say our country because Tom King captured the weird ass zeitgeist of our current political climate so perfectly in this. So it is our world. Congress passes the Amazon Safety Act because there is this uproar about what happened. And it bars all Amazons from U.S. soil. Now, the thing is, Amazons have, gradually become part of our culture. They've had an embassy. And with this particular story, we see that there are Wonder Woman of the stories of the past that are canon. The first Amazon attack is definitely canon. So there's some things that are cleared up there about where this stuff comes in. And to basically enforce this act, they put together, and this is a great a great use of lettering here. The Amazon extradition entity, AXE, to remove those Amazons that don't comply. Most Amazons do comply with Queen Nubia's request that they peacefully leave, but some of the Amazons have formed a life in the States, and they are hesitant, and they're trying to find legal means to stay in the country. Boy, that sounds like ICE, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. The person who was put in charge of this is actually an old Charlton character, Sarge Steele. And in a very economic way, Tom King presents this man as somebody who is almost Amanda Waller's equal, and basically pulls the same kind of strings within the more covert areas of our government. And some of his agents, deal with an Amazon married couple and in a suburb, and it is brutal. It's just brutal. There's a period of tension that goes on, so like weeks, maybe a month has passed, and they finally, the Axe agents finally meet up with Diana in a cemetery. And that's one of the pictures there, and she is in full Diana mode. This was some of the best dialogue I've ever read in a comic about how it's almost a ballet, how she wipes out her adversaries. And she approaches Sarge Steele and tells him, something's not right. Something doesn't seem right. We don't know if this woman was an Amazon. She doesn't seem to be part of our records, or if she is one, she's using an assumed name. And let's work together. He immediately rejects that, and she kicks ass there. Steve, can you also show the next slide there with her? And he's a condescending piece of male shit, and he's calling her girl, even uses the B word, and that's her response, and it's Diana to a T. Behind the scenes, though, there is this entity that appears to be pulling the strings of this, an entity known as the Sovereign. And with Diana's being royalty, it seems like this might be a lasting adversary for her. Now, I think even the biggest Wonder Woman fan will agree that out of the Trinity, she has the least impressive rogues gallery, least impressive group of adversaries.
Yeah.
With this, this may be her Court of Owls, the Sovereign. This was a beautifully paced book, beautifully written book, beautifully drawn book. Go into there. I forget the guy's name. I know his last name is Maury, but his colors are sensational choices throughout. The lettering by Clayton Klaus. Everything is firing on all cylinders with this first issue. And that's the one thing I have to say. This is a first issue. Tom King is very cognizant that this is a number one issue. It's not the first chapter of a trade paperback. It's a number one issue of a comic. And I think that's a dying art. I think that's a dying understanding. And it's nice to see that it's in play here. It does take chances. Wonder Woman doesn't appear until page 20 out of 39 pages. That's her first appearance. And you don't mind it at all because of the way the story is structured and how the pace is set up. I think this was a great start to what I think will be a very memorable run. And I'm really glad that this was the first number one that I pull out of the box. So I think Caleb's read it. And Steve, you were kind of shaking your head like you had read it too. So
I have not read all of them. I have them again in a stack to read because I'm behind on almost all my DC books. except for Sandman, Wesley Dodds. I think that's the only one that I'm caught up on.
So I have read this, and I could just echo everything that you said. So look, I am a huge Wonder Woman fan, right? Like she, as far as DC goes, she's my favorite character in DC. I mean, I love some Superman too. Don't get me wrong, but I do gravitate to her, and she is not always given the writers that she needs, right? She's there's not a lot of just
when you step back, she's had good moments over the past 10, 15 years.
Yeah, so I mean,
Azarello and Rucka's return. I mean, she has had, some very good people associated with her.
She's had some good, and she's had some lows.
Oh yeah, Meredith Finch. Jesus fucking Christ!
And look, I'll go to bat for this guy in a lot of. I go to bat for this guy in a lot of context, but not this one. But Steve Orlando's Wonder Woman was not good. Becky Cloonan and Michael Conrad was not great. It was serviceable, but overall, that's what I think about when I read. Most Wonder Woman comics are serviceable, right? I mean, obviously, you've got Perez, right? You've got Azarello, you've got some standouts, but you don't have nearly the evergreen titles that you see in the other members.
And I think it's something that could be said because her highs are so high, that even like an average book probably is viewed down here, because some of the highs are so high,
and it's inconsistent, right? Like it is.
I mean, it's so dependent upon the perception of Diana is so dependent upon the reader. It's very dependent upon there.
And I really do love her with this. I think Tom King really understands the psyche of that character. Like you said, Tom King. I enjoy Tom King's work. I always have. I think he's fantastic. There's a lot of people that just for better or worse don't. Especially when it comes to a 12-issue series, very few people can do what he can do. I've read up to I think the 4th issue of this, and just has really locked me in. Is telling such a dynamic, impactful story, and it doesn't stop. He carries over the tone and the action through that you get in the first issue. He just keeps it going. He fleshes things out. He runs you through the emotional gamut, and he tells. And he's fair, right? Like he's not making. Again, I've overused this word, but he contextualizes a lot of things. Like there are things that have to be done that don't put Diana in a great light, but they need to be done. And there are things that where she's not the hero, right? Mm-hmm. It almost is, to some degree, he's playing into this. Something I would relate to the theory of like the consent of the governed. Like the hero is only the hero if the people think that they're a hero. Mm-hmm. And when you're persona non grata for an entire country, and you've been kicked out and demonized, and the things that you've done before don't tend to matter, at least in the court of public opinion. So he plays with that. But at the end of the day, she is. In their hands, she is a daunting figure. She is a woman who is not to be trifled with, and she is an absolute force of nature. And I love every minute of it.
And I think for a character that basically wears the American flag, this is about as America in 2024 as you can get any piece. Any piece of work, any piece of artistic work. I was so impressed with this.
It's beautiful. It's so beautiful.
Okay, my next book I don't rank as highly, and I have my reasons, but there was enough to talk about and enough to keep me interested. So the next book I want to talk about, and Steve, if you have a graphic, I'm such a TV producer. I should have gone that route. I go into Outsiders #1, the writing team of Lansing and Kelly, who basically, is this their first DC work? I believe it might be.
I'm not sure.
First together or just first period?
Well, it's not Andy Lanning. It's Jackson Lanning.
Lansing.
Lansing. Sorry. Yeah.
Lansing.
I think I'm not sure. Anyway, If they did something, it wasn't that notable. Anyway, so here we have an Outsiders #1. Again, the Outsiders began life as Batman's offshoot team after he got pissed at the Justice League for not intervening in Markovia because Lucius Fox was captured. That's what happened. So we have here a team. You'll see one of Caleb's favorite characters, Kate Kane, Batwoman.
There's so much. I'm so sad that you started off with this book saying there were things you didn't like. I love this book.
But I think you'll agree with. I honestly think you will agree with some of my points.
Okay? I will, but it just there's so much about this book I love.
Okay. You have Luke Fox, who goes in and out of his guise of Batwing. You have Lucius Fox, his father, who is basically a member behind the scenes. And that new character that you see there is known as Drummer. This is a brand new character who basically talks to architecture and has some other strange powers and is actually older than everybody else pictured there. There's some, again, Caleb, I'm only going on the first issue, but that's what I think I can say about it. She talks to history, let's put it that way.
We've seen something like this before.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I think you're going to be
Yeah.
You're going to mention that towards the end of it.
Yeah. We start off, and Kate Kane is in a Qarak type of fictional Arabic country in the DC universe. I had to live this line because as clunky as I thought the beginning of the book, you won't have to wear the wig, I think is going to be a line that will be forever associated with Kate Kane and this line and this part going forward. Luke and Lucius have to rescue a group of team. Caleb, is it ever said that they're Wayne Tech? Do they ever say that?
It's been a little bit since I read this, so I don't remember. I don't think so, but it kind of implies that. Like it very much implies that this is stuff that he had a hand in, and that's why he's there, right? Like he's trying to clean up his own mess to some degree.
Yeah. So anyway, Kate is a little sick of all the battleground. There seems to be a different war in Gotham every month. She's a little tired of it, and okay. Thank you, Steve, for that. I guess Lansing by himself has nothing stood out. That's for damn sure. Luke approaches Kate, and he wants to put together a team that really are outsiders. They're not there to be a superhero team. They're there for knowledge and to figure out strange situations. And the first strange situation that they encounter is the excavation of a mysterious vessel in the Arctic. It turns out that this is some kind of multiversal starship. And while it's unclear, they identify the entity who refers to him, her, itself as Carrier. And Steve, if you can go to the next slide. I mean, I thought this was just a wonderful mechanism to explain what's going on here. I was a home to heroes. There were victories within me. There were friendships inside me. There were weddings in my heart. One of my absolute favorite comics of all time was an issue in the 80s of Secret Origins, where it was told. 2 of the 3 stories were told from the perspective of the Justice League's original cave and the Legionnaire who ended up becoming the Clubhouse. And this may sound like completely wanky, but they're absolutely beautifully constructed stories. So I have a soft spot, and talking to history and geography ties into a book that Caleb talked about an omnibus a few months ago in the DC universe. So as not in superhero fashion, instead of battling this excavated vessel that has taken over the bodies of, as you'll see there, the crew that was there, they reason with it. And I think that sets a very nice tone for where this book is going to go. And then, Steve, if you can just keep going with the graphics, the last panel of the first issue, and we see a reference to something. There's a very big authority reference in the book as well. And I think out of all the concepts that did not originate with DC that came into DC's fold, Quality and Fawcett and Charlton, the most abrasive integration so far has been Wildstorm.
Yeah.
But this really worked very well on that basis. The downsides to this, some of the dialogue in the beginning was, it was like, think of like a C grade spy movie from the like maybe like late 90s, when Luke is drafting Kate into this operation. Could have lifted it from that, and that probably would have been better than what we got. The art is not necessarily distinctive. There were moments I did like, but it felt clunky in many parts. The use of since we don't have thought balloons, but we have sequences in the story that come from one character's perspective or another. It didn't work here. It shifted like it was just too clunky. I keep going back to clunky in switching back and forth between whose perspective, whereas with Wonder Woman #1 it was perfectly executed.
Yeah,
but there was still enough that I enjoyed. There really was. There was still enough that kept me wanting more, and so I guess that did its job.
Well, so I read the first 3 issues all at once, right? I let them stack up, and I had no idea what to expect from this. I just picked it up because Kate Kane was on the cover, and I was like, yeah, no, I'm going to read this because it's my girl. So I got it, and I read the first 3 issues, and so maybe I had less of an issue with those kind of things that you're talking about because I read it in a bigger, and it does feel like towards, I would say even towards the first issue, but towards the second and third issue, like they find their way, and so I think if you're reading it, it will become less clunky. Those things they kind of find their groove, so to speak.
Yeah.
But also it's because I think they're trying to set it up and lead to a certain spot. This book is inherently planetary, right? Like this book is they're not just tapping into it; they're bringing it full force in.
And yet, would you agree with me? This book, and this maybe become where this team has just come from, also has a very Marvel feel.
Defenders.
Yeah.
But Defenders isn't that cerebral. This is far more than Defenders.
Some of the latest Defenders, like I'm thinking.
Oh, okay. I'm still thinking of like Hulk.
Oh, not the old the old one, but
Pretty Girl with
like the post Hickman, Defenders.
Still my Defenders,
Well, and like Defenders Beyond that just came out that dealt with like the Beyonders and
that I will agree with you because you can understand my Defenders is 70 Defenders.
Wow, Ghost Rider.
I know what you're talking about. This does but even has a Guardians feel, has an Avengers feel. Yeah. This felt very Marvel to me too.
Who's the Doctor Strange corollary here?
Detrimental.
I think the reason that is because part of the book they get into some of the human issues, right? Like these are not Superman and Wonder Woman. This is not Batman. These are not the iconic God figures. These are like Kate Kane has always felt a little bit Marvel because she's somebody that struggles with real life. So like
I don't buy that. I don't buy that. I would have bought that up to like 86. I don't see Marvel as having a claim on that.
No, but in this, like when I think
and I mean like modern Marvel.
Sure, yeah. Okay, so you're talking about modern Marvel. I think that character, like she's somebody that has struggled with reality, which does separate her from like Superman and Wonder Woman. But to me, like again, the last Outsiders book I read was Red Hood and the Outsiders, which had Bizarro and Athena in it as with Red Hood. So like, I think there's a little bit of a relation to that, to taking these kind of tertiary characters and throwing them into all these weird different things. But for like, when I realized what they were doing with Planetary, like my just like blood pressure went up, and I tore through those 3 issues. And I was like, okay, don't do that thing where you just touch on it and then just, if you're going to do it, right? Go all in. And they do. They go all in with it. It is fantastic. I'm giddy over this. And
please never let Batman appear in this book.
There's no need to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no need to. Keep it. Who would I want to see in this book? Maybe Zatanna. Like, Zatanna showing up to do something weird. Maybe
Rip Hunter.
Yeah, I could see Rip Hunter.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Rip Hunter would.
Metamorpho.
Yeah.
I could see Metamorpho showing up in this to some degree, right?
Doom Patrol. Yeah. I mean, it's the edges. This is about
the weird ones.
Yeah.
The weird ones.
Yeah.
Which is, again, feels like more recent Defenders. Like, let's get some weird ones in here.
Yeah.
Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Man.
Again, Caleb, like, though I don't come on the positive end of a recommendation, I'm definitely someone that wants to see where this goes.
Yeah, I can see that too. You haven't read past the first issue though, right?
Nope.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts once you read a couple issues in. Because I don't want to make any predictions on what it'll be. It could go either way, but for me, I read it all, like the first 3 issues in a chunk, like I said, and that really framed everything for me. And seeing where it's going and getting a big chunk of it at once, and just really being able to immerse myself in what it is, and just get really excited about what they're doing, because they're doing it well. Because I would agree with you, like the integration of the Wildstorm stuff was not great, and really the only characters that they've done with it and made work, it's not even characters, it's really just Midnighter. It's not even Midnighter and Apollo. To some point it is. Like, I love Steve Orlando stuff, right?
Yeah.
But like,
I would sort of agree with you. I do think that some of the grifter stories in Urban Legend,
grifter.
Yeah, I think they use grifter right there.
Yeah. He's the closest one, but
but it's like, Stormwatch was.
Yeah.
Oh, and that was like a new. Like, I read the new 52 Stormwatch.
The new 52 Stormwatch. Yeah.
It just doesn't work. Yeah.
But the Wildstorm, the one that they tried to bring it back, and give it its own
Atlas led.
Yeah, give it its own little plot. I liked that. Not many other people did, but I thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, we're past the 2-hour mark, and I was not surprised by this, because we haven't seen each other in this format in 3 weeks. So, and like longer than that, because Caleb was gone from the last episode. Yeah. I was gone from the episode before that, apart from the end of it. So I'm glad we got this. I'm so glad we had this time together.
I've missed you guys.
Yeah. So we're going to start wrapping this show up regardless, though. And when we do wrap an episode of the Comic Book Bears up, we have 2 segments that come towards the end. The first is where we show off our Geek Gets. Now, the guy that always claims he never has one has already showed off one of his, which is that beautiful X-Men 97 poster that Steve's going to tell us about right now.
I got it from my store. There you go. I usually, my local comic shop, which is actually 90 miles away from me, that I go to every week, he will hold aside, interesting posters that he gets, and just kind of like throw them in my bag when I get my books. So this was one of them, and I was really excited about it. But I also, Bill and I both do this. We go whenever, say McDonald's has a promotion with their Happy Meals. That's vaguely DC related. We will definitely pick these up. And I actually, the first time was a bum deal. I ended up getting Pokemon cards instead. But oh yeah, but they are doing multiverses right now promotions, and you get these really fancy tins that have a WB or Cartoon Network figure on the back, and and a DC character, and it's to promote a video game that did get released, I think, last year sometime, but then they pulled it because they had a lot of work to do on it, and they are bringing it back. So they wanted to release these things, and basically what's in the tin is just puzzles. They're two-sided puzzles, and they have like just a collection of the different characters that you can play: Steven Universe, Wonder Woman, Batman, Arya Stark from Game of Thrones. Like just anything that's a WB owned property gets kind of thrown together in this. But they're really cool. They're very neat, and just cute. So that's what I got.
Yeah, I have to say with McDonald's, like I haven't gotten any of these because I've been eating salads for lunch. I have to do what I got to do. But McDonald's made a push to use more recyclable materials in the packaging. And just before this, they've had like effectively blind boxes, which avoided the use of plastics for the tearaway packaging, and that's a really intriguing way to continue with that by using the metallic. That's cool.
Yeah, I like those.
Yeah, cool. So, Steve, if you can get any extras, I'd appreciate it since I'm really not going.
I need to go back because I haven't gotten any for like over a week now.
Yeah.
Usually I try to get like all those, use all my points on free Happy Meals.
Yeah.
But I'll pick up a couple more this week, hopefully.
My points always went to the McMuffins. All right. Anyway, over to Caleb. Caleb, let's see what your Geek Gets are.
All right. So last week, late the week before that, I went to think to myself, I really like Florence and the Machine, and I've been learning some Florence and the Machine songs on ye old bass back here, and it's a fun time. And I was sitting downstairs with the girls while they were playing like something on TV, and I was like, you know what? I want to listen to a certain song. Let me pull out the record that's on. And I went to grab it, and it's not there. And I was like, what? That's not right. There's Florence I don't own. So I pulled up the Florence discography, and turns out there's 2 albums that I didn't own. I can't have that. So I fixed it. And got 2 Florence and the Machine albums in last week. And so I now have, other than the live albums, I now have her full discography that Florence and the Machine have put out. So those are my Geek Gets over the past couple weeks. So always in the mood for new music, and I'm always in the mood to add to my collection. So I now get all of the Florence.
All right, cool. I'm going to echo Caleb in format. And part of this was inspired by going around to record shops with our friend Tito while he was here. So there were a few vinyl albums that I got over the last 3 weeks. As massive as a Who fan as I am, I have never had a copy of the debut album with the British cover of My Generation. In the States, it was known as the Who Sing My Generation. I've had a copy of that for like 40 years, but I've never had well, I have digitally, but that doesn't count. So this is the Who's debut album from 1965. Just one of the best covers of all time. You already know what you're in for a little bit here, with just this beautiful mod clothing that they have. So finally have a copy like that. An album that I've listened to so many times over the last 9 years that I did not own physically is the debut solo album by Jamie XX of the XX. And I got a copy of In Color. And this is how long our podcast was, Steve. That was one of the major tangents that Matt Brossard and I went on when this album came out, just talking about how Loud Places was such an amazing song. But after 9 years, I finally have a copy of that. And then in terms of stuff that's new, Tank, the new album by Idols, I have a copy of that.
Which is an amazing album.
Yeah. First time they've used an outside producer They used Goodrich, who worked with Radiohead, and it works. There's some really interesting choices sonically in this that I don't think they could have. I'm not sure if they could have achieved on their own. So got that too. So music.
It's a fun
Well,
thing.
I have a couple notes here. Victor Rose was going to be checking out The Outsiders at his local comic shop.
Oh.
You wanted to mention that. And then Daniel Williamson, in reference to the music here, he started listening to Jason Isbell after we recommended him. So, yeah,
Cool.
that's cool. Thank
That's
you.
cool,
So
Daniel.
it's not just
That's really
comics
cool.
that people come to watch our show for or listen to us.
Yeah.
They also listen to music recommendations from you guys. I say you guys because I never recommend music.
All right. So we're now going to move on to our final segment, and that's something we call the Woofs of the Week. In the bear community, if you find a fella attractive, you woof at him. And we do something very similar where we woof at something which may be a comic book or comic book related, but it may also be a TV show or a film or charitable initiative, anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener or viewer, may be interested in sampling. I'll start as I always do with Steve. Steve, what is your woof of the week?
My woof of the week is a funny, weird British show that just started back for season 3. So if anybody's ever watched any Kunk on Earth or Kunk on whatever, British history, Diane Morgan is the actress. She's a hilarious comedian. I love her stuff. And she has another sort of character who's very unique and interesting called Mandy. And this is the 3rd season that Mandy is at. They're, usual quick 6-episode seasons, over in the UK. These are about like 15-minute long episodes, so they're pretty short, real easy to watch. They're hilarious. It's surreal. I mean, there's stuff that happens in these shows that in these episodes that is completely unrealistic and ridiculous. And she has a perfect characterization. She does not break character. This Mandy character, it is fully realized she's ridiculous and also somewhat lovable. Yeah, I totally recommend Mandy. Just released season 3 on BBC iPlayer. So if you have access to BBC iPlayer, VPN, or if you live in the UK, you can see it completely. They just released all 6 episodes for season 3. Or you could go back and watch seasons 1 and 2. I don't know where this is available in the US. So if you can find it, great. If you're in the UK, lucky you. Or if you know somebody with a Plex server that happens to have all of the episodes, you can, find them. But yeah, Mandy.
Cool. All right, over to Caleb. Caleb, what is your woof of the week?
So I'm going to follow in the Steve vein here and talk about a television show that I just wrapped up, specifically on Hulu, and that is Shogun. Now, if you've seen this show or not, if you're into samurais, if you're into 17th century feudal Japan, if you're into the influx of the Western world into that environment, but you don't want like the Last Samurai version of it, this is for you. This is very much taken from the 1979 novel by James Clavell, which immediately I have not read. I need to. But it just kind of shows you what's going on in that world. All of a sudden, an English sailor shows up shipwrecked with his crew on the shores of Japan. And they're not supposed to be there. And no one really knows how they got there or what they're doing there or what's going on. But it's a very much a show of political intrigue, because while this is happening, what you also come to find out is that the Catholic Church, who is at war with, Spain and Portugal are at war with England at the time. It's the Protestants versus the Catholics, and that same old song and dance. They have actually developed trade routes with Japan by this time, and they're keeping it very hush-hush and very secret. Well, now, a sailor with maybe some secretive intent, some clandestine intent, has showed up with a boat full of cannons and is about to turn the tide, or at least throw a wrench into the machinations of the Catholic Church, which, by the way, has got a strong footprint now. You start to see there is no shogunate, right? That's a big problem. And so you have all of the lower cabinet who are trying to work together to fill the gap, and some of them are Christians and some are not. It's very West Wing meets samurai culture, and I absolutely loved it. And they did a really good job of avoiding like the white knight trope, right? Like this dude is thrown in there and he's got some shit to do and some things to say, but he's not the super savior. He's just kind of like trying to survive and learning their culture and the words and how not to die. Basically, it's a big thing for him. He would like to stay alive, as I can imagine that you would. So go check this out on Hulu. Be prepared to pay attention. As you might expect, the vast majority of the show is in Japanese. You're going to read subtitles if you want to know what's going on. They do break into English. They also break into Spanish and Portuguese in some scenes. And so you got to read subtitles. You got to pay attention or you will get lost. But I adored this show. The acting was amazing. The costuming was incredible. Just see this world just brought to life in the way that they were able to do it. It was fascinating. And also the main character who plays your English sailor, he plays a sailor named John Blackthorne, but in the real world, this actor's name is Cosmo Jarvis, which very like that might be the perfect name. I don't know if there's a better name out there. And it's not a porn name, but his name is Cosmo Jarvis. That's awesome.
It could be a porn name. It could be.
I would do porn with him. So, it's just kind of up to him. Call me.
Okay. My vote for that would be Shakira flabbergasted, but that's another story.
Or don't leave Dick Warlock out of this.
Yeah. Caleb, did you know that in 1990 I saw the musical version of Shogun that played on Broadway?
I did not.
Well, I did. The out of town previews were 3 hours and 45 minutes long. It was shortened to about 2 hours and 50 minutes when it made it to Broadway.
Wow.
This was a time where there were various shows that were desperate to be another Les Miserables.
Yeah.
The woman who played Lady Mariko was good. The costumes were amazing. Everything else, la bamba.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it did not work.
One of my favorite characters in the show is not somebody you're supposed to like. I mean, it's just there's so much in this show that's it's like the West Wing. It's like there's all kinds of characters. It's fun.
Yeah. That was like one of my mother's favorite books. I remember she finished it and then she was like, I like this so much. I'm just going to read it again.
I've never read it before. I need to get my hands on it.
And I doubt you've ever seen the Richard Chamberlain TV.
I haven't. No
miniseries version. Yeah. Okay. Enough Shogun. I'm going to move on to my Wolf of the Week. And Steve, if you can provide the graphic there to accompany this. Mine is television as well, but it's a TV documentary from HBO Max that is The Truth versus Alex Jones. And this covers the lawsuits, and they actually have cameras in the courtroom, of the lawsuit by the Sandy Hook parents against Alex Jones for defamation and other charges that resulted from him claiming that Sandy Hook was faked. And the part that really got to me, and again, it's very well balanced because they spend just enough time covering Alex Jones as a phenomenon. They spend just enough time on the Sandy Hook massacre, and then the rest is dedicated to the actual machinations of the trial. It was really well structured that way. On a IM that Caleb was not part of, but Steve was, there's a brief sequence where they interview and discuss some of the other Sandy Hook deniers other than Alex Jones. And I really wanted to murder these people. These are odious, horrible people. Yeah. But again, the majority of the bandwidth is dedicated to the trials, and it's a fascinating look into what the families were going through, what Jones was going through, in a sense. Caleb, when you do watch this, I would really like to hear your input, because I was so much more impressed with the council in Texas than I was with the council in Connecticut. Just good lawyering is always fascinating to watch. But again, they do address that, Jones is not the disease. He's this, he's just one of the bugs that's going around.
Yeah.
There's bigger problems in this country when, as stated, 24% of the country believes that Sandy Hook was faked.
Yep.
And that the parents were crisis actors. You have to be in the right frame of mind. Don't be in an angry place because you might get on the internet and scream at everybody, and that's basically what this is about. So don't be that person. But it's definitely a worthwhile watch. The Truth versus Alice Jones.
It's on my list. It's something that I struggle with, just because it is something that needs to be explored and told. At the same token, it's something that we should not have to have an in-depth documentary to understand the truth.
Mm-hmm.
It's yet another thing where it's like I hate that it has to exist. It shouldn't. There are objective truths in this world, but as you said, people like him are not they are a symptom. They are not the disease. And the same could be said about larger political figures.
Mm-hmm. Before we go, just for the visuals for people who are watching this, Steve, I see your shirt is a Peacemaker shirt. Cool.
It's an HBO Max Peacemaker shirt.
Caleb, is that an EOC?
It is an EOC shirt.
Okay. There you go. 2022. And you probably only get the beginning of mine, but this is my new Space Wolf.
Space Wolf.
Space Wolf.
Yeah. We have cool clothes.
We do.
But if you're listening to the audio, just peek in the YouTube, just see what it's about. I know still most of the people get this through the audio delivery. In terms of the audio episodes, if you're watching this, we're going to have an episode coming out on an audio basis on Saturday morning and on Sunday morning. And then hopefully this one will come out next week. Sorry for being behind on that. But we'll get back up to speed. So we're wrapping this up. Again, we are the Comic Book Bears podcast. You can find us on the social medias as Comic Book Bears, apart from Facebook, where we are Comic Book Bears podcast. If you want to listen to us, you can do so by downloading us through Apple Podcasts and catching us through many of the other podcatching platforms. If you want to write to us, please do so by sending an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. Until next time, I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Steve Morey.
And I'm the Easter Bunny.
I'm the Easter Bunny. What is that? I'm not gonna worry about it. Anyway, we'll be back again in 2 weeks. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.